Welcome to Mpowered Living. I'm Sheu. On this podcast, innovative leaders and visionary experts share insights and practical tools for work, family, and marriage. Each episode, we'll explore how to elevate your life while staying grounded in what truly matters to you. You're working hard to navigate relationships, build a thriving family, and create a legacy of purpose. We're here to help you do that with confidence and intentionality. So if you're ready to live a life by design, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Mpowered Living. I'm your host, Sheu, and my guest today is Tia Graham. Tia is a resilience coach and speaker who helps high achievers navigate stress, quiet the inner critic, and build a more compassionate relationship with themselves so that they can lead and live in a way that actually feels aligned. What stood out to me in this conversation is how universal this experience is, that feeling of being triggered and overwhelmed and feeling not enough, even when on the outside, everything looks like it's working. In this episode, we talk about why those moments when we are pushed to our limits are not random. They're often reflections of deeper patterns shaped by our upbringing, our environment, and the expectations we've internalized over time. We also get into why so many driven, high-performing people are actually the hardest on themselves, and how that constant pressure quietly impacts the way we show up in our work, our relationships, and especially as parents. Tia shares a powerful reframe on self-compassion, not as something soft or optional, but as a science-backed skill that can fundamentally change your resilience, your leadership, and your overall well-being. We also explore how to start recognizing your triggers, understanding where they come from, and slowly shifting the voice in your head from one of criticism to one of support. This is a really honest, grounded conversation, and one that I think so many of us need. Let's dive in. Tia, welcome to the show. I can't wait to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so your work focuses so much on resilience and, you like dealing with the inner critic and finding true happiness. What have you learned about human behavior when people are really pushed to their limits?
Great question. So, when people are pushed to their limits, what I've learned is that whatever's triggering you and pushing you to the limits is connected to things that have happened in your past, whether that be in your childhood, adolescence, even your early adulthood, and that we all have different capacities, right? Based on our genetics, the environment we're in, our upbringing, and we all have, different resources. So different people can get pushed to their limits faster than others. But the first step is really self-awareness and understanding when and how you get pushed to your limits, and then getting clarity around how come I get to that point and what do I want to do instead. And for some people, you can do this on your own. For others, you may need to work with a coach or therapist to help you change how you react and your behavior.
Okay, so I know for me personally, I am most triggered in moments of parenting. So if you are speaking to somebody that is listening and they are a parent and that they also find themselves in that situation, what would be your starting point tip for them? Like, what's the one thing that they could be doing to really help them create the awareness around what's triggering them, why they're being triggered, and how to show up better for their kids?
So first of all, same. My kids trigger me the most. And I think that our kids are sent to us to show us all the parts of us that are unhealed and where we need to grow. So it's a challenge and it's a blessing, right? Like anything in life. My first step would be to write down what's going on when you get triggered, not what you do, but what's going on. For example, for me, when my girls are fighting, that's a big trigger. When one of my kids doesn't want to go to sleep on time, that's a trigger because I'm like done by 8:30 and I want to be done by parenting. I want to be done, right? Whenever there's anything loud, like if there's any screaming or yelling, that's very triggering. So write down a list of what's going on, what are the specific situations and events. And it's not just kids, right? It's like what specifically. Um, and so that would be the first step. I would then write down, what do you do when you get triggered, right? Do you go into fight, flight, freeze, right? What do you do? Do you yell back? One of my members in the Feel Good Club, she just leaves, right? She's like out of there. She just gets out of that room, gets out of the house, and just her kids follow her, right? What do you do? And then I would say is, for a lens looking at this, which is what I teach all working moms, is self-compassion, right? It's so easy to beat yourself up, but everyone gets triggered. Maybe not the Dalai Lama because he meditates like 5 hours a day, but everyone else gets triggered. And so don't beat yourself up. Don't have like tons of guilt and shame. It's like, yeah, this is stressful. Raising kids is stressful and can be super overwhelming. And so as you're starting this process, just be kind to yourself along the way.
Okay, so you use the word self compassion, and I'm curious because a lot of our listeners are high achieving, driven, hard hitting go getters. Self compassion might sound a little, I don't know, like a little woo woo or a little like weak. So, what would you tell those people that maybe have not fully embraced this idea of self compassion? What would you tell them about like why this idea is important? What have you learned about it? How it actually affects the way that they show up, their level of resilience, the way that they lead their teams and their families?
Okay. So I completely understand if you think this way because I used to be that way too. I used to believe, and I led sales and marketing teams, I ran my life, high achiever, hard on myself, and perfectionist,
Yeah.
high standards in all areas. And I'll even use the word berate. Like I would be very hard on myself if things didn't go right in my executive career or at home. So, leading researcher on self compassion in the Western world is Dr. Kristen Neff, and she's wrote a book called Self Compassion. And you can just go to her website if you want to actually see all her research papers on self compassion. So, self compassion is proven to make you more happy,
Mm.
to make you calmer, to make you more resilient, to make you a better leader, to make you a more compassionate partner, and to actually be a more connected parent. I could go on and on. There are so many work and personal benefits. And the science of self compassion has three parts. So, part one is self kindness. So, this is training yourself, just like you train yourself to build more muscles in your body. You train yourself to talk to yourself with kindness as opposed to being critical. And this isn't about lowering your standards or about not having huge goals or not being this high achiever, because I'm one too. It's not about changing what you want to do and the life you want and the career you want, but it's how you treat yourself when there's a misstep or a mistake or something doesn't go exactly as planned. Instead of beating yourself, you actually talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend who's also a high achiever who messes up. So you can actually change your neural pathways and change how you talk to yourself. And it has, in addition to all the benefits, there's also huge physiological benefits, right? For your immune system, for your heart, for your lots and lots of benefits. The second part of self compassion is mindfulness.
Mm.
And there's so much research on mindfulness, right? When high achieving people slow down and prioritize time to get quiet and notice their thoughts, notice what they're feeling, notice what's happening in their body, they're going to become more aware, they're going to become calmer, and they're going to become a lot wiser. And so that's a part of it too, is understanding, when am I really hard on myself, right? And there's not a lot of benefits to being super hard on yourself, the research shows. And then the third part of the science of self-compassion is common humanity. So this is, let's say you are an entrepreneur and you have a company and you also have a husband or a wife and kids, and something goes wrong, right? Maybe you like lose a big customer or you lose your top salesperson, right? Something goes wrong. As that leader, it's pausing and knowing that there are thousands, maybe millions of people just like you around the globe experiencing the same challenge and pain. It's connecting to we are never ever alone. It's never this, I have these challenges. This is a human experience and being a leader, being an entrepreneur and then having kids, it's a lot. And a lot of times when we are going through challenges, we feel very alone. We might talk about it with our wife but it's actually connecting to common humanity, right? There's 8 billion of us. And just doing that when things are challenging is really, really supportive. So it's not soft, it's based on science, and it can really, really help you psychologically, emotionally, in your career, in your relationships. It's life changing.
Okay, that's helpful. So, what about the language that people might be using? If they're new to focusing on self compassion, right? So, it's not something that they've really been working on. What is the language that they might be using that might give them a sign that maybe it is time to start working on self compassion? Or maybe some language that they might be using that they don't realize is even harmful, but is working in the background and making us feel insecure, not enough.
Great question. Some language could be like if you are not practicing self compassion on a regular basis, could be am I doing enough?
Mm,
Am I good enough as
mm.
a parent, at work, maybe in your marriage? I shouldn't have made that mistake. How could I have done that? I shouldn't have done that. That's not good enough. Think about like a really, really, really mean sports coach,
Mm,
right? Or like a referee in your head that's like, no, you're not, that's not good enough. Nope, that's not good enough. Nope, you're not keeping up. Your business should be bigger. Your kids should be better. Your kids shouldn't be doing, right? Someone that's like talking to you in a way that really doesn't make you feel good.
yeah.
And our brains have a negativity bias, and some people have way more of a negativity bias than others based on our genetics. Some people's negative voice inside is a lot louder and is more throughout the day than others. And so there's this evolutionary part to it, right? Like our brains are designed to keep us safe and alive, not happy and feeling supported. We're all it's still these animals. And so it's understanding that your brain is doing that to it thinks it's helping you, but it's actually hurting you.
I would love to know, where does this inner critic come from?
Great question. So part of it is just biological, right? And if now I'm going to go ask AI, like, are humans, or sorry, are animals? Do animals have inner critic like other mammals?
Yeah.
So there's an evolutionary in terms of our brains are designed to keep us alive and keep us safe. And so, like, why is the news 99.9% negative? Because that's what our brains are attracted to, right? That's what sells advertising dollars. And so our brains are just wired for negativity, whether it's looking on the outside or the way we talk to ourselves on the inside. And I think it goes back to that keeping us safe, keeping us alive. And it also comes from the first 20 years of our life, right? So if there are challenges with your parents, which a lot of people have, of course, different challenges with parents. Kids are not separate, like the psychology of kids are not separate from their parents. So let's say you grow up in a house and the parents are fighting a lot. We as kids will internalize it as something's wrong with me because they're not aware that there's this separation, right? The psyche. So different things that happen, or you get in trouble at school, you get in trouble at work. There's different messages that we receive that like we are not enough.
Okay.
It also comes from societal expectations, right? What does everyone what's the word? Everyone put, I want to say like act like who's on the cover of magazines? It's
Mhm.
people who are successful, people who are rich, people who are famous. And there's this amplification, of course, of social media. So let's say you didn't get straight A's in school. Maybe you messed up in your sports. How do your parents react? How does society react? And even people that are doing, people at Yale who are doing great still feel this. So it's not like, oh, successful people don't feel this way, right? So it's also comes from our family, comes from culture, comes from society, that there's constant messaging of you are not enough.
Mm,
Even though it's all lies. You are. You absolutely are.
yeah. What does that shift actually look like from inner critic to inner cheerleader?
So the shift is awareness and understanding, kind of what we were just talking about, right? That everyone, I'll speak to 600 people and I'll say, who has a loud inner critic? All 600 people in the audience will raise their hand. Who has a really loud inner critic? Put up both. 90% will put up both hands. So it's
And
like, this is a human experience. Knowing that, for me, it was really, really helpful to understand different things in my childhood that maybe made it louder, right? That like, where did this really come from? Things that happened when I was 6, 7, 8, etc. And so you can explore that with a professional, or you could do it on your own of like, okay, what happened in my childhood and teen years that amplified this inner critic? And then it's really about making a choice. And this is just like making a choice to have happiness as one of your values, is making the choice to change, right? The amazing thing is that our brains are plastic. You and I can always change, can always work on things to say, I'm actually tired of that inner critic. And I'd like to have a supportive cheerleader instead, and to use the science, to use the research on how, right? And you might be able to do it on your own. Maybe you do it with a coach, maybe do it with a friend, maybe family members, right? And it's the same as I would say if you would say, okay, someone's 100 pounds overweight, what do they do? Right? This is talking about your, instead of your physical immune system, this is your psychological immune system, your emotional immune system. So it's saying, I'm going to work on it and I'm going to choose to be kind to myself. I'm going to choose to use mindfulness. I'm going to remember that all humans are the same. And and you'll slowly start catching yourself, right? So for example, it might be like, oh, I miss my kid's game. Like I'm a great, good, really good dad, or I'm not a good mom. And then it's like, oh, there it is again.
hmm yeah,
And you just, with mindfulness and with practice, you become more and more aware, and you just get better and better and better at it. Just like that 100-pound person that keeps going to the gym and gets stronger and stronger and stronger.
how do you enroll a partner or a spouse in this practice with you?
So, one of my professors, Dr. Ben Shahar, who used to teach happiness at Harvard University, is that because this question is asked a lot, like, how do I help someone else change? The best way to help someone change is to inspire them with your actions, right? So, and again, I can't help but thinking, because everyone knows physical exercise, everyone like that's such a common thing. Go to the gym, go to the gym, go to the gym. Nobody likes being told what to do, or like quit smoking or whatever, right? You're saying to your spouse.
hmm
But when your spouse sees the positive changes in you and you're like walking the talk and they're seeing that, that's what I believe is the best way. And of course, you can share the research, you can share the data and everything too. But I think being an example and them seeing the transformation and seeing the results is probably the most effective way.
Rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, so you talk a lot about the science of happiness. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have around this idea of happiness?
Few misconceptions are, some people believe and think that it's all genetics. So people, it's like, yeah, there's people are born happy, or people are born, depressed, and like Eeyore, and like there's a bit in between, and like basically you get what you get, comes from your, genetic history, and that's it. And that's not true. The science shows that everyone has different set points, but everyone can become happier by learning about the science of happiness and applying it. So that's one big misconception. Another misconception is the effect, how much your environment affects your happiness. And usually people overestimate how much their environment. So,
Mm,
where you live, what you do for work, etc. Now, of course, like people in the Middle East, their environment is, or in different places.
mhm.
Of course. Like if you're not getting your basic needs met or you're in danger, you're not thinking about happiness, right? You're just trying to get your needs met. But a lot of people give more weight to their environment and underestimate how much their choices really can affect happiness. So we have agency over our thinking and over our behaviors. And there's so much we can do. There's literally thousands of research papers on thinking and behaviors to increase your well-being. A massive, massive misconception too is on money and happiness,
Mm.
right? So wealthy people are happier than people, and again, considering you have your needs met. I'm not talking about below poverty line. That's like assuming you have your needs met and a little bit of spending money, right? But like if people grossly overestimate that way more money is going to make them way happier. And it makes them happier because really you get time affluence, but it's a lot less. So many people, especially in this country or in Western countries, will sacrifice things that make them happy, like time with friends and family, sleep, exercise, doing charity work, spending time in nature. I could go on reading, all, things that bring them joy because they're like, I'm going to get way more successful and then I'm going to be happier. And it's just not true, right? It's kind of like more material possessions, etc. So yeah, those are some big ones. I could give more, but those are some big ones.
Those are huge.
Yeah.
What contributes to long-term sustainable happiness instead of just like chasing a temporary high?
Yeah, like kind of like chasing pleasure or chasing. Yeah, great question. So the research shows that the number one predictor of happiness across cultures, demographics, ethnicity, age is human connection.
Mm.
So this is spending time with people that you care about and who care about you. This is your friends and your family. And I like to think of it as imagine a doctor gave you 6 months to live, right? Like you have cancer, you're going to die in 6 months. Would you be like nonstop emails and not hanging out with your family? Probably not. But in reality, we're all mortal and none of us know when we're going to die. So, and the number one regret of the dying is I didn't spend enough time with my family. And so that's number one, like big, bold. If you're going to do one thing, it's human connection for long-term happiness. And the Harvard Grant study, which is the longest study on human development, which worked with uh, all different types of people and researched all different types of people, showed that the number one predictor of happiness, this is, I think it's over 85 years, is your relationships,
Mm.
right? And so that's a big one. And this includes the relationship you have with yourself, because the relationship you have with yourself affects your relationships with your friends and your family, right? So I would put that in there too. Um, for long-term happiness, think of these buckets. So another one is spiritual well-being.
Mm.
So this can be your religious faith or not, but this is, connecting to things that are bigger than you, right? Um, your physical health. So it's pretty hard to be happy if you're not getting enough sleep and eating right and moving your body. All three, there's so much research on those. And then taking care of your mental health, right? I say to my audiences and my working moms, nourish your brain the way you nourish your stomach. Like, what content are you watching? What are you consuming? And we need to be very protective because we have a negative mindset, a negative bias. So, watch a TED talk instead of TikTok or read a book instead of, watching the news. Like, stay informed. But anyway, so that's that. Another big pillar is intellectual well being. And I know this is where you and your husband work, is a lot of learning and growing. So when you are learning and growing as an adult, you are happier. So whether it's learning French, guitar, how to write a book, how to grow your company, learning makes you happier. Know that. Um, and then two other things are there's about, let's just say, 80 positive emotions and about 80 painful emotions, right? Where you're actually suffering and you're not feeling happy. And both of those are part of the human experience. Everyone has both, unless you're a sociopath, right? Is listening. So you have positive emotions and you have painful emotions. And so it's being very intentional and purposeful on, okay, I want to feel more joy. What brings me joy? Or I want to feel calmer, or I want to feel more love in my life, or right to think about what do I want to feel? And then you make choices based on your thinking behavior to feel more of those. And on the painful side, it's when you are going through painful experiences, which you're going to because you're a human and humans have pain and suffering, understanding that there's nothing wrong with you, that you're going through those, and to not be hard on yourself or feel bad or feel like you're doing something wrong because you're not happy. No one is happy all the time. That's not realistic. And so it's having a healthy relationship when you're with those emotions and having healthy coping mechanisms for when you're going through those. And the research shows that when you're not feeling great, when you are having a lot of anxiety or fear or anger or stress or apathy or languishing or you name it, it's to talk to someone, could be your spouse, could be friend, could be a therapist, could be a coach, could be your mom. Talk about what you're going through and also writing about what you're going through. Because everything is temporary, nothing stays the same. So it's like processing it and knowing that it'll pass, that there'll be light again. And then sure enough, there's gonna be another challenge. So and not beating yourself up for it. So those are the big pillars.
Okay. Can we go back to what you were talking about earlier as far as like relationships and human connection is like the number one thing, the number one factor in whether you're happy or not?
Yeah.
And I would love for you to share what are the characteristics of relationships when it's contributing to your happiness in a very healthy way? Like what are some of those things that we should be trying to cultivate in our relationships so that it does help increase our happiness factor?
Really, really good question. You're the first person that's ever asked me that. So, what comes to mind is listening, active listening, empathy, which is having the other person feel like you really want to understand what it's like being them, right? Not just because we all have our own lens on reality. So, true empathy and understanding, forgiveness, because everyone's going to mess up, whether it's your kids, your spouse, your coworker, co-founder, right? Practicing that forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, compassion for others, compassion for self, thinking of my marriage, and we've been together about 20 years, support and encouragement and trying to lift them up when they're down, right? Bring in, because there's always like this different balance of when one person's feeling really positive and optimistic and maybe the other person. So helping them, when they're down too, vulnerability,
Yeah.
right? Being really real, being authentic, not trying to be perfect. I really, really love Dr. Becky Kennedy's research on the four parts of repair of like when you mess up, it's not just sorry, it's I'm sorry. I understand this is the effect that that had on you. This is what I'm going to try and do differently next time because I want to have this and really, really focusing on repair. Yeah, and then the other thing that comes to mind is just trying to have thinking of those 80 positive emotions like, emotions are contagious. So as much as you can help lift others up in your life too. But yeah, I don't know. What is there anything big thing that I miss when you think about your life and your relationships?
No, and I mean, I hear that. Listen, I'm so thankful that, my relationship with Sunny has a lot of those things, but I'm curious about the person who might be listening and might be hearing that and might be struggling with happiness, but then they hear your list and they're like, well, my partner doesn't do any of those things. Right. And so like what would you say to the listener who's hearing it? And, this might go back to what we talked about earlier around like rising tide lifts all boats. Like what would be your message to them? Like if they're hearing that and they're like, well, my husband or my wife, they don't do any of that.
Like they're not a great listener. They don't.
Right.
So don't have the goal of perfection. I don't want you to think that like my life and my relationship all perfect either. And we've gone through huge challenges. Both our kids have disabilities. We both are entrepreneurs. We don't have any family around. Like, I don't want you to think, oh, Tia's life is all perfect and roses. Not at all. So if you're hearing that and thinking like, whoa, I don't know if I necessarily do all those things and my partner certainly doesn't, that's completely okay. Right? Don't be hard on yourself or beat yourself up. That's for I just want to say that. I would then my advice would be to take time and journal about what's working, what's really well, like where are the strengths in our relationship and where are the challenges? What are the weaknesses? Maybe it is on forgiveness or maybe it is on repair or etc. And I would find a time when both of you are relaxed, definitely when the kids are not around, when you're not like super stressed with work, like on a date night, or maybe you can go for a hike together or something. And you just talk and you start off. I always like to start, like I appreciate this and start off with what you're grateful for and don't just go like on the attack right away, but have that. And if you could be holding hands if you want. And then I would say, I really care about our relationship. And I think these are some of the areas where we can get better. Um, and also know that you might not be able to get there on your own.
Mm,
There was a period where my husband and I hired a couples therapist because the stress of our kids was so much that we needed support. Right. So, and that's investing. Yeah, I think it's step by step and it's a journey and both of you keep changing and new challenges present itself. And the last thing I'll say is because I'm in this working mom space, and a lot of ambitious moms don't feel supported by their partner with the invisible load and the mental load, and maybe even the physical load of kids in house, even though both work full time. Is after a long time, right? If you still are so full of like resentment and you are not happy, and the person is not, I'm a believer that life is too short to I mean, one of my huge values, probably no surprise, is happiness and well-being. And I think for some people, going apart is the right decision. My parents broke up and they're both happier because of it. Was it hard? Absolutely. Was it the right decision? Without a doubt. Right. So I think it's how much after effort and after time, like how much is it taking from you
mm,
versus giving to you? And your partner should both to each other, you should get more, not like get like in a
yeah,
get, but like energetically, spiritually, supportive than not. Not all the time, but more than not.
that's helpful. Okay. So I'm curious, you've worked with a ton of leaders. What is something that you have noticed, like a belief about stress or leadership that has really, that you've like changed your mind about over your course of studying happiness and working with leaders?
So I was a leader for 14 years and then, studied a lot about positive leadership and having a happy team. I naturally, just because of my personality and how I was raised, I naturally was a positive leader, and that was, something that was very, very important to me. I know not all people lead like that, but there is a big misconception with so many leaders that if I am positive, and this is not about being positive and toxic positivity every second, no, right? This is still being a real human. But there's a big misconception around if I'm positive a lot of the time, right? If I am really supportive, if I'm an empathetic leader, if I really, really care about my team happiness, I'm going to be perceived maybe as weak or not serious. And like, I get asked this all the time like, does happiness really belong in business? Like, this is business. Yet, the research shows that teams that are happier make more revenue, more profit. You have less turnover, higher retention, higher sales, better customer satisfaction. there's a list of 30 KPIs that any business owner and leader would want. And so it's recognizing that um, it can be both. You can be so results focused, you can be a
Mhm.
driver, you can be a high achiever, and you can prioritize being the type of leader that makes people feel
Mm.
happy most of the time and where the team is happy. And your organization will soar. You will definitely beat your competitors, right? So for me, it was finding all the research to, I guess, substantiate what I knew. And I worked with leaders that made me miserable, and I worked with leaders that made me really, really happy. So I was like, okay, I know the difference, what it feels like. This seems better. Let me go find research to back this up.
Okay, do you want to do a couple rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay, one habit that builds self compassion.
Talking to yourself like you would talk to your best friend when you mess up.
Okay, tangent from that one. How do we notice when we're not doing that? What's like the one thing that we could put in place to create more awareness around that?
So you can notice when you make a mistake at work or at home, or you don't show up as your highest, truest self,
Mhm.
right? And then after the mistake, are feeling you're feeling bad about it for
Mm.
quite a while. Like it might ruin your day or even your week if it's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to like, okay, I let's use a home one, right? Like I snapped at my kid because we were late for school. And instead of having that, it's like, all right, that, not the best, but I was stressed. This happened. Like, I'm going to try again tomorrow. I'm a great parent. And like, it affects you for maybe 10 minutes as opposed to all day. You're ruminating over it.
Okay, what about a mindset or a habit that people should let go of?
Ooh. The first thing that comes to mind is scrolling a really long time on your phone. Cause I know well, the algorithms are very, they make it as addictive as possible. That's one that comes to mind. And for sure, do not watch the news on television because it makes you 31% more negative. So read about the news, stay informed, but never watch it on television.
Yeah. One book that should be required reading for everybody.
Okay, well, my book is called Be a Happy Leader. So if you're a leader of one or more people, I think that should be required reading. Um,
Tell us more about the book.
Okay, so my book is called Be a Happy Leader, and it is my proprietary, sorry, I should have had it closer, my proprietary 8 steps
Beautiful.
to stop feeling overwhelmed, thrive personally, and achieve killer business results. And it's based on the science of happiness and the science of happiness at work. And it's very, very practical, full of vulnerable stories on things that I messed up and, learned along the way. And so I would say that's required reading. And then another one for me that was life changing. And this goes back to a question you asked earlier. If you are triggered a lot by your kids or husband, or maybe you get triggered by people at work or other family members, a book that changed my life is The Body Keeps the Score. And it's
Mm.
understanding why I was so triggered. And then it gave me a path to be way, way, way less triggered.
Yeah. Okay, and then last question on rapid fire. What's one question that we should be asking ourselves when we feel like we're under pressure or overwhelmed?
Under pressure and overwhelmed is um, pausing. Again, I like to write things down of thinking of everything that's overwhelming us. So making a brain dump, a list, getting it out of your head and putting it out. You could type it, right? Putting it out, of course, you could use AI, but put it out on paper. And then, and you could do this alone, or you could do this with someone in your business. You could do this with your spouse if it's overwhelmed with work and home and kids or just work. Is then going, okay, this is too much for me right now. I am over capacity, hence I'm overwhelmed. And so, what do I want to prioritize? And what do I want to let go of? Or what do I want to delegate? Where do I need more support? And one thing I'll say is So there's this amazing researcher named Dr. Casey Holmes. She's at UCLA and she researches time and happiness and how we spend our time. And a really great tool when you're overwhelmed and underwater is to stop doing all the things that are making you overwhelmed and actually go practice self-care, like exercise, go for a walk, even though you feel like you don't have time. You're like, how could I work out? I don't have time. Or how could I read? Or how could I go to bed early? Like I am swamped. When you make time to do those things, you actually feel like you have more time, which is
Fascinating.
crazy, right? People don't think that. So, yeah, get it out and then take care of yourself and you're going to have this like reset.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Okay, if people are listening and they want to learn more about you, more about your work, what's the easiest way to learn about you and connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is my name, tiagraham.com. And I'm also very active on LinkedIn, Tia Graham, and then on Instagram. And on my blog, I have a lot of free resources for working parents.
I love that. And we will drop all those links into the show notes so that our listeners can find them easily. It has been such a joy having you on the show today, Tia. I have learned so much from you, and I'm excited to share this episode with everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Empowered Living. I hope today's conversation sparked some inspiration and gave you tools to live more intentionally in your family, work, and life. If you enjoyed our episode today, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or actionable takeaway. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them. Because living an intentional life is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, the life you want doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. Let's keep creating it one step at a time.